Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on the Ubuntu and data Altis webinar on the Ubuntu and data engineering tools. Hope this will be a good learning experience for everyone. So we'll be starting the webinar now. I'll be working through the content that I have prepared. But if you have any questions, please put that on the Q&A chat box. So there is an option to raise your questions in Zoom. So you can you can log the questions there. I will actually answer the questions at the end of the session. Yeah. Okay. It's 11:06 now. Let's get started with the session. So okay. So the session will be primarily driven from my VS Code. So that's the whole point of it, how to use VS Code. So I didn't want to actually like come up with the PPT and explaining the steps. So the idea will be to actually run through the setup live and then see how it goes, see the commands working, and then like move on to the next steps. So it will be like a live software performance actually. So we'll see how it goes. There could be some hiccups along the way. If there is, then that will be a learning experience for everyone as well, including me, as how to solve that issue or something like that. Okay. So whom this particular session is for, it's a very hands-on session, and this is for people who are already working with data, who know actually how to do ETL, or who know how to do analytics, SQL and BI, but they want to start their journey towards more cloud-oriented deployments and open source based tools. So right, so that's the primary goal of this. Everyone like working in data, they use different tools, but now everything is converging to the cloud. How to and then also there are open source development tools available, how to use them. So that's the primary goal of this session. I'll be introducing few of those tools in this session. So these steps, all of the steps that I'm actually taking you through is is available on the Git. I have already posted that in LinkedIn. You can also post this session. You can also go to my GitHub and then follow these steps and then make the same setup, or follow along this video and then make the same setup in your laptops as well. Okay. So the below steps will help you to set up your laptops. Also provides the introduction to deploying the databases using the DevOps tools, and then writing serverless API. So not only set up laptops, but also provide you some of the basic tools that's to actually automate your deployments, and then also deploy serverless APIs in the cloud or any serverless application. Okay. This is why we are actually, I am including Ubuntu, setup of Ubuntu for Windows, because I believe that anybody who is working in data, or like anybody who is a developer working in the cloud, I believe that they should know Linux, and then they should have access to a Linux terminal, and then Docker in their local environment. So that's why I actually included. Majority of the developers don't have any choice. They have to work on the Windows laptop, because that's the more of the corporate dominated version of the workstation. So it is important that we set up Linux and Docker in our local environment. I think that's where Windows has also started their journey. They have included Linux as a native app in their OS. So all the developers will love to use the Windows, right? Windows users, for Windows users, unfortunately, it's not a default app. Still, we have to actually go through some steps in order to get that set up. So that's all covered in this session. Okay. So the agenda will be installing the Ubuntu app on Windows 10 and then running Docker on the Ubuntu app natively using the WSL2. When there was WSL1, there was a network layer communication. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but now they have made it very native. You can run a lot more apps on Ubuntu than in WSL2 than than WSL1. Okay, so okay, like I also want to highlight how we can use some of the Linux command lines to actually interrogate data, process data, and transform data. Just a quick introduction to set you or I can get you started in that path. So, okay, so how we can use VS Code for actually connecting to your database, and then how you can explore the data just using VS Code. Right, so that's what we'll be looking at in one of the sections, and then also building the serverless API. So that will be using the serverless framework. So we'll be deploying an API and then querying the API from our VS Code. So everything will happen within VS Code. So that's the whole thing. I love VS Code. So hopefully everything goes fine, and then you also start using VS Code in your projects as well. Okay, so how to first set up Ubuntu on Windows 10. For this, you need to be in, so you can see the VS Code also provides the inbuilt terminal. So you don't have to go out of VS Code to execute your commands. So how to install Ubuntu 10? So we have a blog in our Altis website, which you can follow along, but I have the steps here as well. Okay, so first you need to be in the PowerShell. Okay, so open PowerShell. You can see now switch between PowerShell and other terminal types as well. Okay, so now we are in PowerShell. So the first step is to enable the WSL. Okay, so you run this command. Okay, it's takes some time. Okay, so once this command is completed, because my machine is already set up, you have to restart the machine. Okay, so once you restart the machine, you will get your WSL setup. Okay, so enable the Windows subsystem for Linux. So this is the next step actually. So this one is to actually uh, uh, enable another feature. This one is for Windows subsystem. This is for the virtual machine platform, right? So you can run this as well. I think the heading is not right, but I'll fix it later. Okay, so that's done. Okay, at this point, what you have to do is like you need to update your Linux kernel. So the Linux kernel is actually now what Windows has started doing is that they have started shipping their Windows kernel as an app for Windows. So you can click this link and then download the latest Windows kernel and then install it. Right, so that's the normal installation process for a Windows app. Okay, so now we can check what Windows, what we have in WSL. Okay, this will display more than what a first time user will see. Okay, you can see that, okay, already I have the Ubuntu is running, but in your case, you may not see this because we have not yet installed any, at this stage, we have not yet installed any app, Linux app or Docker as well. So in your case, you will not see this, but in my case, you can see that, okay, WSL version is 2 actually. So in the first time users, maybe they can do this. And then see the version, right? Okay, so also set your version to 2. So in case like you are in version 1, so you need to set your version to 2 so that you get all the new features for WSL 2. So which is a more powerful than WSL 1. Okay. So that's done. So at this point, you can go to the Microsoft Store and then install Linux. Okay. So I'm not going to go there, but if you go to the Microsoft Store in your local app, a local desktop, and then search for Linux, you can there comes a list of apps. You can choose one of them and then install. In our session today, we will be using the Ubuntu 20.04, which is the latest version of Ubuntu, but you can do like Alpine, you can do CentOS. There are other versions as well that you can use. Okay. So once you have installed the version of the Linux, you can also set that version as your default distribution. So you can do this, right? Okay, so that's been done. So at this point, we are done setting up our Ubuntu. So we have enabled the WSL, we have installed the Linux kernel, then we have installed the Linux app, and then also selected our default version of Ubuntu or Linux, right? That needs to be used. Okay, at this point, we can exit the PowerShell. Okay, and then open the WSL command line. Okay, so that's done. So how to set up Docker? So you can download and then install Docker from the Docker website. So this one is a direct link to the installer. So when you click this, it will download the installer. Once you download and then install like a normal Windows app, what you should do is like you need to go to settings, general, and then check that we need to use the WSL engine. Okay, so what I will do is I'll open my Docker and then share what you have to do for this step. Okay, I'm just opening my Docker. It might take some time actually. Okay, it came up quickly. Okay, I'm going to share my Docker screen. Okay. Hopefully you can see my Docker screen. I can see that, okay, like it's highlighted. So this is the Docker screen. Okay, so in this, you need to go into the settings. Okay, and then make sure that this WSL, the WSL2 based engine is selected. So if you are using WSL1, this is what is the TLS protocol that would have got used. But this is what you need to use when you are in WSL2. It's more native integration between Docker and the WSL2 based Linux environment. Okay, so once you have done that, you need to apply and restart. Okay, and then under resources, again, you have another option here. When you have the WSL2, you can go to WSL integration and then make sure enable integration with my default distro. Click this one, make sure this is checked, and then also enable the integration with additional distribution. So make sure this is checked as well. So you can do these two and then apply restart. So then you will have your Docker configured for use in the WSL2 environment. Okay, let's switch back to, once you do this, we can switch back to the VS Code. Okay. Okay. So, okay. So we are back to the VS Code here. So this is the Docker and the install. We have installed it. We have gone to the setting and then we have done this step. And then we have actually also done this settings, resources, WSL. Oh, sorry. Okay, come back, double clicked it. It took me to the actual file. Okay, come down. Okay, so yeah, we have done this, and then also we have also done this settings, resources, and then WSL integration, and then we have selected the enable integration with my default WSL distribution, right? Okay, so we have done that. Okay, once we are done, we can run the getting started with the Docker. So this is a native Docker step to see if your Docker environment is working. Let's see if it works for me now. Okay, and then also, like, since we are using VS Code, so you can also have a Docker extension here. So you can install the extension using this extensions app and then search for Docker. Okay, so and then you can see I'm installed with this. So Docker, so that's an extension like that you can use to browse the Docker images that's available in your local and start them, stop them, or delete them without leaving this environment, right? So I have already got that set up. So you can see that, okay, it's under here, Docker. There is this Docker container is already there. Okay, so this Docker container is already executed in my local, but let's execute this again. So it says unable to find the image locally, and it's going to download that image for me now. That's what it is doing. It's going to the Docker Hub and it's downloading. So you can use any Docker that's already available in the Docker Hub, and it's downloading. So it will be started. Let's look at that. Like you can do Docker PS. You can see that this particular Docker endpoint is started actually, right? Okay, let me show you that this is running, and then we can access this app locally from our browser, because you can see that this is an app that exposes the URL in the 8080 port, TCP 8080 port. So let's see that if we can access that actually. So let me open my browser and then go to localhost and then see if it brings up this window. Okay. So I am sharing my browser now. Okay, you can see that this is the Docker app that is exposed by the local Docker that we have run now. So this is what the command we ran, and this is the app that has been started by the Docker. Okay, that's good. So the Docker is working. Okay, so I'm not going to go into much detail into Docker. This is the scope, like how to set up Docker for your Windows environment and then access Docker from the WSL to base Linux terminal. Okay, let's go back to the next step. Okay, we have done the second agenda item, which is the Docker. Okay, so now exciting part, which is to actually look at how we can use Linux to interrogate data. So I'm going to introduce a module called JQ within Linux. So that's what is this code sample is for. And then also I also have a code snippet as how you can do word count on a particular text. Okay, this is similar to MapReduce. If you have known MapReduce, the example that it starts with is the word count. Like it collects the words from the document and then tells you a summary of the summary. It gives you a summary as how many times a word has appeared in that text. So it is similar to actually, like if you have used SQL, it is similar to actually saying, okay, like extract each word and then group by that word and then give me count star, right? So that's the similar example. And then also how to do that with awk. Okay, I'll not double click it. How to do that with the awk. So we'll see all these three examples now. Okay, before that, I also organized a simple data folder in my Windows, in my VS Code. You can see this is the data folder, which I'm using as an example, which also will be get committed to my Git repo. Okay, so we have a text. You can see this is the text file, and then we have a JSON file. Okay, so this is the JSON file. Okay, so this is the JSON file that we are going to interrogate right now. Okay, so this particular JSON file can also be viewed using an extension within the VS Code. Okay, let's open this JSON and then look at how it looks. Okay, you can see that this is a JSON file that's having a customer array. Okay, and so it has a lot of customer records. Okay, so if you want to actually look at this particular JSON file, once you have opened this JSON file, you can use this JSON extension in order to go and then look at the data and then easily understand the nodes, the nesting and all of that. Let's do that. Okay, you can see that it immediately tells me that this particular array contains 200 records Okay, you can open this, and then it's going to give me the records like each and every item. It's going slow actually. Yeah, you can see for the 0 record, what are all the values. So you can, if it is nested, you can actually like do this and then collapse it, right? So you could do this and then go to a particular value and then see what values are there. So it's a pretty handy if you are working with JSON, any configuration files. You could use VS Code in order to actually browse through it like the way you would actually explore a file explorer, right? Okay, that's it. Okay, let's see how we can convert the exercise that I have set up, or the example that I have set up is actually converting that JSON file. You can see that converting that JSON file into a CSV file. Okay, so that's what we are going to do now. Okay, first I'll execute it so that the result will come in the command line. Then we can actually write it into a file. Let's see, we can, so you can see this command actually starting from this folder, JSON folder. I think for that we need to go into the data folder. So I'll do an I'm in the serverless folder here. I'll do an ls. So you can see it is the same folder where we are like data, Liquibase, and the readme and all of that is there here. Okay, let's go into the data folder, cd data. Okay, and then do an ls, and then do an ls on JSON. Okay, so you see that we have this JSON sample .json. Okay, so what it's going to do is that it is going to use the JQ module, and then it's going to extract the customer, and then it's going to map it so that like we get the entire JSON record as a CSV output. So let's see how it works. So it's important that like, yeah, we know JSON, JQ. If you are working with the terminal, it's very useful in data manipulation. So you can see that, okay, it has the entire record has come as CSV now. So we have converted a JSON file into a CSV file with a simple command. Okay, so if you want to actually write this write this into another file, just redirect. So let's write this into CSV sample .csv. So it has written. So you can see that under CSV, you will see a new file here. You see sample.csv. We can open this and then like, yeah, so there is a CSV file. Okay, so there are extensions that will also help you to explore CSV files. If you want, you can install them. That's what I'm getting this pop-up here. Okay, so that's done. Okay. Now come to the next one. So which is to actually count the number of words in a particular file. So here in this example, I'm using sed. Sed is a very popular tool in Linux to actually find and replace or execute a regular expression against the input file or on any text stream, right? So that's what sed is used for. So I've used sed here 3 times. So I'll just quickly explain what it does. So basically, words are separated by spaces. So I'm replacing spaces with new lines, and then also I'm removing the dots so that like the end of sentence words don't have the dots when we are counting the words. And then also I'm replacing any empty words like which has only spaces. I don't want to see them in the count. So I'm actually removing the spaces completely if there are any after we have introduced the new line between the words. Okay. Once that's done, that means like we will have a list of words that are available in the uh, list of words that are available in the text. Okay. So then we are sorting, because before we actually calculate the unique, we need to actually sort the data. Okay. So once we sort it, we can also also do a sort of the final result as well. I think like it will be better I explain it once the results come up on the screen. Let me clear the screen, copy this, then go a little bit, make it bigger. Okay. So we are already in the data. So let's go back and then remove this one. This is not required because already we are in the data. Okay, let's see. Okay, you can see that this has done a head. So that means a head will only give you the first 10 records. Okay, so what this is doing is it is actually doing a reverse sort. So that means a descending sort, and then it is also using human readable sort. That means like it will treat numbers as numbers. So that's what it will do. So those are the flags that we have given. Okay, so in case if you want to see the bottom 10, this is the top 10. This is the 2 is the highest number, 2 and 8 are the highest occurrence in the text, and then followed by the in and everything. So if you want to see the bottom ones, you can do a tail. Okay, you see these are the words that appeared only once in the text actually. So advantage and all of those things appeared only once. So that's how easy it is, right? Okay, so we can do the same thing using awk. Awk was actually written in Bell Labs for AT&T during, I think in the 70s, and then it was rewritten again in the 85, 86, and that's called the new awk or the new awk, right? So it's a very, very powerful tool, and it is primarily written for data processing. Like you could write a complete data application using awk. I'm not a big expert, but I want people to actually use this because and learn this. It's very fun, and then also it's very challenging, and it's very useful as well. Okay, let's see what this does. It is again the same thing. We are now already in the data folder, so let's remove this one. Okay, so let's see what it does. It should give us the similar result. Okay, so you see that it gave us the similar result, but this is not sorted. So if you want to sort this, we can also sort this actually. Sort minus or h, because by here in this case, the count is on the right side. Previously in the method that we use, count is on the left side. Let's see what this does. Okay, it probably did the same thing. You can see the same words that we see when we in the bottom when we did the tail. Okay, if you want to get the top, you can just do a head and then you get the top, right? So here, because this is alphabetical, it's also bringing those words like with the Y and the 1 actually. So that's what it is doing. Okay, so that's done. Okay, so till now we have not talked about like completely doing everything on the VS Code. In case like this is a setup, so because beyond this particular webinar, the idea is that okay, somebody can follow along, install, and then set up their environment as well. So they can copy this project and then follow along the steps from the Git, and then set up everything in their local machine. So at this point, I expect the people who is following along the instruction to go and then download and then install VS Code if they are not set up. So we are not going to do that now because we already got the VS Code set up. We are not going to do that now. So let's go into the next step. Okay, we are going past the half an hour mark, so please stay on. I think it will be another 15-20 minutes. Okay, so this one is section is like how to use VS Code to connect to your data, and then also how to deploy a simple SQL application using Liquibase. So that's what we will be covering in this particular step. Okay, so okay, first actually what you need to do is that you need to go to extension and then set up SQL tools, or like if you search for Snowflake, okay, you can see that there has to be something related to SQL tools, but I already have set up. So you can see this is the SQL driver for Snowflake. Okay, this is what I already have installed. So when you install this, you get an app that will help you to connect to Snowflake. So I have actually got a trial Snowflake instance running. So it's a 30 days trial. So anyone with an email ID can get a access to Snowflake. They can go to Snowflake or Google, search for Snowflake trial. It will take you to a link and register for the trial. So then you get a Snowflake endpoint for a month. So you can learn Snowflake and then experiment any new pet projects that you have. Okay, let's look at the extension. So that's the first item. Okay, so already I have actually set up a connection to my account. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to create a new connection. So you can add a new connection, and then so it's, you see that, okay, you have a it shows you what are all the drivers you have. Let's select Snowflake. So you can give a name, connection group, and then the account. So there is a specific format that you need to follow, and the instructions are here, and then username and password, the database you want to connect to, and the warehouse. Like if you know Snowflake, so you need to say like which workload or like which computer or which warehouse you want to execute your queries on, because Snowflake charges based on the workload you are executing. It's not for the storage or the server that is permanently running. Okay, so then you can select the schema and the role that you want to use. So, and then save connection. So that's how you connect to Snowflake. So that I already done that. So in this connection, let's close this one. And then you see that once I click it, it's connecting to the environment. Okay. So I already connected to the Snowflake database called sample data. So you see that once connected, it shows this icon. And then also open editor for us to write the SQLs. Okay, so you can explore Snowflake here, and then this is the database. You can say it says the database, then the schemas. Let's close this. Okay, so you can see that there are different schemas. Each of these schema actually gives you different volumes of data. Okay, and then go inside, then you can see the different tables. Okay, so what we can do is, okay, you can generate insert query for this table, or you can also you can also preview data. Actually, you see it can take you up to the column level. So you can see show table records. Okay, let's close this one so that we can see this clearly. You can see that, okay, these columns are available here. All the columns are available here, and then you can rerun the query, and then it's cool that it also gives you the count of records at the bottom. And then also you can export this data in JSON format or like CSV format. Okay, so this is the actual data I actually exported for JSON, which we used previously. So it's very useful to browse through the data. So if you, let's close this one. Also, like if we execute any SQL, let's see what databases we have. Right, and then I'll show you like what sort of commands are available. So Control Shift P, you can see that, okay, under SQL tools, you can have different commands. Right, let's search for SQL tools and then run. We want to run a query. You can see that, okay, you can run the current query. I have actually assigned it to a shortcut. And then you can also choose a query from your history and then also run. Okay, and then also you can bookmark few queries and then rerun those queries as well. Okay, let's run this query now. So it's going to show me all the databases. These are the 3 databases that are present in Snowflake right now. So that's what it is showing. Okay, so if you go back to the extension and then let's close this, and you see that here it has actually now shows you the history of the queries, and you can rerun this query. So if you want, okay, you rerun this query. Okay, it's really useful. So that's the SQL tools and connecting to Snowflake. Let's close this one. Okay, I think we don't need this right now. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so now what we have to install is an app, Liquibase. Okay, this app will help you deploy tables to Snowflake or any other database, any other popular database for that matter. It can be SQL Server or it can be Redshift or anything. So this is basically what we use for creating the CI/CD pipeline based Snowflake applications, right? So you can deploy it automatically using your CI/CD pipeline like Azure DevOps, or you can use GitLab pipelines. Okay, so again, the script is available here. You can execute the script. So under Liquibase, you have the install.ch. It is the same code available here. Let's open the terminal again. Okay, it brought the same terminal back. Okay, let's go back on level ls and then cd Liquibase. ls, we have this install. When we do this, we have to be in sudo sh install.sh. It's going to ask for the password. Okay, it's not doing anything. Yeah, it's connecting. Okay. It's not working now. As I said, the interesting moment has come for this session. Let me do sudo apt update outside and then rerun this one. Okay. So I'm just trying to resolve this issue in another window. Let me see if I can do it. Okay, I can't do it, but let's move on to this session. But I'm not sure why I'm not able to access the internet. Could be that because am I on VPN? Yeah, okay, let me disconnect from the VPN and then check this one. I think that could be the issue. Yeah, I think that could be the issue. Let's try again. Yeah, it's working now. Yeah, it's installing everything. So let's actually quickly review the steps of what it is doing. Okay, so it is actually updating the Ubuntu repository endpoints. So any instructions that you go on the internet will ask you to do that, so that you get the latest endpoint information of where the packages needs to be downloaded, and then you have to install Java. So if you are a first-time user, you need to do this. Then you have to also have an unzip, because the Liquibase package is zipped, so you need to be able to unzip it. So then wget is the native tool to download any app from the internet. So once you do that, then this is the Liquibase, and the next one is the jar file, which actually is the Snowflake driver, right, for Liquibase or used by Liquibase. So both of them are downloaded. Once you download them, so this is another thing. This is the JDBC jar as well. So couple of other workloads or packages for Liquibase to work. So unzip them and then move them into a folder called Liquibase, right? Liquibase lib. So the Liquibase gets moved into this folder called Liquibase, and then we move the jar file to the lib folders. the Snowflake jar and the JDBC jar. Okay, so that's done. So let's check if our Liquibase command works. Okay. Okay, this works actually, and then you can see that, okay, we can execute Liquibase bat or Liquibase jar actually. Okay, so then this now works. So before we execute this command, Liquibase command, to actually create the tables, let's look at the SQL file that I have in the sample. So I have the SQL file. Let's open the SQL file. So it's basically, this is the format. If you are using the Liquibase, and then if you want to use a plain SQL text file to deploy your database, you need to actually have defined something in the top that should start with -- Liquibase formatted SQL that tells Liquibase that we are actually using this format to communicate with it. Then this is called the change log. Okay, and then this is called the change set. So each and every SQL operation within Liquibase is called a change set. So it needs to be called a change set, and then you need to give the author name, and there are other parameters we need to give. So this is a basic format that works fine. Okay, so this is the second query. So we are creating a table called person, then we are creating a table called company, then we are adding a column to the table person called country, right? Okay, this is the query that we are going to run. And then also you can see that, okay, this is a pretty like VS Code is easy to write SQL. So it highlights the SQL format. It also detects that it's a SQL file, and it helps you like uh, uh, format the file. So you can easily use say VS Code for your SQL development. So that's another thing. Okay, so let's go back. Let's see the next step. So before we can create the tables, we need to have a database in which that table can be created. Because Liquibase works on a JDBC, it needs to connect to a database. So that database must exist before we can deploy an application to that database. Okay, it cannot be created by Liquibase. So let's create the database. Go to our SQL tools, go to our connection, and then like open a new file. Oh, it's like I select a new connection now. Let's open a new file. So select, paste this, and then run this query. So database webinar is created. Let's see if it got created. Show databases. So as I said, I'm going to run this one query. You can see that webinar is created. So that's what we did. Okay, let's close this one. Okay, now we are going to execute this set of SQL statements to create this table in that new database. Okay, how we do that? So I have the command here. I have actually hidden the username and password and the account details so that like it's not public. It's all set up in my environment variable. So also you can see that, okay, this is the JDBC format for connecting to Snowflake. And then we created this webinar database just now, webinar, and then I'll be using the default schema public to create the tables. Okay, let's run this. Okay, it's actually executing the code. Okay, I think we are not there in the same folder as the SQL file is, because like we need to actually, we are just saying like change log file, sample change log. So that's the file we need to execute. So we need to be in the correct path. So that's the issue. Sorry about that. LSCD SQL. Okay, so it's executing. Let's see if it works. Okay, so it says like it has done the work successfully. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is actually explore that created tables now using my SQL tools. So because we are connected to webinar, So let's edit this connection and then connected to Snowflake sample data database. Let's edit this connection and then like connect to the new database. So edit connection. Okay. So let's go to schema. Okay, not there. Yeah, webinar. Okay, let's see if it works. Test connection. Okay, it's saved. Okay, and then connect. Got connected. You can see that, okay, the two tables that we created, you see that we created this table called company, and then we created this table called person. So these two tables are like sort of like registry tables used by Liquibase. And if you and then you can see that we also added a additional column to the person using alter statement called country. You can see that has come through as well. So if we rerun this query, it will not do anything, because you can see that, okay, the queries that are run by Liquibase are already logged here. So it knows that, okay, who actually wrote the query, which is your name, and then what query got executed, actually the file name of from where the query came, and then when it was executed. So it logs everything. So if we rerun it, even though it's actually we have a create table in our SQL, it will not complain, saying that because the table already exists, you cannot recreate it. So if I rerun this one, it's going to say like, okay, I have already done all the operations that in the SQL. It's going to come out, it's going to be quiet, and then just exit. You see, it would not have done anything, right? So I can refresh this one. And now to refresh, but like, yeah, so if you just show table records, it's not going to change, right? So it's a rerun query. We could have done this. Okay, cool. So that's the end of the SQL session of how to use VS Code and other DevOps tools to work with data. So let's now come to the serverless. I think we have 8 minutes if you are targeting for 1 hour. So for this session, so we need to have a Node.js, because we are going to work with a framework called serverless framework. So we need to make sure that we have Node.js. If you run this, I already installed. So you can install it using this, and then you need to then use install the serverless package, so which will be using the npm sudo npm install -g serverless. If you are on an older version, you can update it. Okay, once you do that, so if you do sls help, you can see that it's available. You see sls help, it's available. Okay, so first, okay, there are a lot of templates available with serverless. Let's go into the serverless folder. So there is nothing here. So if you run this command, it will actually create a sample Python AWS serverless app. So let's see, like there are other templates as well, right? You don't have to restrict yourself to this. If you're if you want to use other languages, you can still do it. So you can see that, okay, you can see these are the templates that are available. You can do Node.js Docker, AWS Node.js TypeScript, you can do Python, you can do AWS Alexa. So not only that, serverless means like you can also do Azure, you can also do Google as well. So you can connect using this serverless. You can connect to, you see, Google Python. You can connect to any cloud, or you can deploy your application in any cloud. In our case today, we will be actually doing it for the AWS. So I'll be selecting AWS and Python 3 and deploying this to my AWS account. Okay, let's clear this. Let's create the app, get the template. Okay, so then once you have got the template, if you go here, go to the serverless folder, let's refresh this. You can see already I have the files created by the template command. So these were the files that are created by the template command. Okay, you have a Python code and then a configuration file that tells the serverless what to create in the cloud. Okay, let's review that. Okay, so first of all, you need to have a service name. This is mandatory, and then you need to have the framework version. Then the provider tells like whether we want to deploy our app in AWS or Google or Azure, and then what is the runtime. So in our case, it's Python. So also you need to give a stage. We need to give a stage because we are working with API gateway. So we need to give a stage, and then also we need to specify the region. So these two things I'll edit today. Okay, so then it has to align with this one. So otherwise it will complain. So let's keep it as dev and then change this to Sydney. AP South East 2. Okay, that's what we have to do. This is one change we have to do. Okay, so basically if you open the Python code, so this is basically the simple app which just gets input. It doesn't, it gets an input and then it responds with the status 200. Okay, so that's what it does. Okay, so it's a very simple one. So we will be accessing this particular Python code using an API gateway. So that means we will be deploying a REST API today. Okay, that will work with the get operation. So let's come down. So for that, we have to enable the event for the function. So this is the serverless function, which is the hello. And then you can see that it's pointing to the handler file, which is the handler. And then within that, it's the function hello, which will be called. So you can see that this is the function hello that will get called. Okay, so now we want to actually access this function using the API gateway, using get method. Okay, so that's what we are doing. So we want to enable an event. So telling that event is something that executes the function. Okay, so we have got that. And then we have saved this. Okay, let's see that we can package the code. SLS package. Okay, so that's package got created. So you can see that we have the CloudFormation and then the other code packages that are generated. Let's do an SLS deploy now. So this is going to take some time. I think like we are nearing 12 o'clock. It's nearing an hour. This will take like little bit time, like 2 to 3 minutes, I think, for this to get created. Okay, so I have already set up connection to my AWS account using the command line. So that's why it's working fine. And that information of how to connect to AWS is not covered in this session, but I'll include in my Git repo. Okay, but also you can use the AWS extension as well, and then see how this stack is getting created here. So you can see I'm connected to the Sydney because we are actually deploying to Sydney. And then you can see that, okay, there are CloudFormation getting created. I think it's not yet created, but there could be an S3 file. You can see that there is an S3 file, and then it has actually uploaded a serverless folder, and then it has a dev stage we gave, and then the code package as well with the timestamp. You see, this is the CloudFormation, which is used to represent infrastructure as code, and then this is our Python library that got zipped up as a package. So first it uploads the contents to S3, then it deploys to the CloudFormation. So you can also access other functions using this AWS extension in VS Code. Let's see if it did anything to the CloudFormation. No, not yet. CloudFormation has not come. Not yet. It's still going. This step takes a bit of time. So once we have created this, we will access our API using the another extension in VS Code, which is the Thunder client. Yeah. So this done now, and then it also has given us the API endpoint. So let's see that we are able to browse this API or check that API exists in the AWS using this. It's not yet detecting yet. Yeah, okay, it has not come through. Not sure why, but CloudFormation. You see, the CloudFormation is there. Maybe maybe it takes some time for the API to respond. Okay. Okay, let's close this one. And then, okay, let's copy this. Okay. Copied it, just right click and then go to Thunder client, which is the REST API, which is similar to Postman, and then create a new request. Let's bring this down. Copy this. And then since there is no security parameters like a token or something like that, user ID or a password, we can just query this one. Yeah, our API worked. It's very simple as that. Let's resize this one. You can see this was the input that was provided by the API call, and this is the message that we actually coded as the response. Go serverless, your function executed successfully. So that's the response from the API. So you can also query REST APIs just by being within the VS Code. You don't have to go out of VS Code for anything actually. Like most of the thing you should get done within VS Code as itself. So that brings us to the end of the session. I have covered everything that I wanted to cover today. So that brings us to the end of the session. Okay, let me see if there are any QA question outstanding. Let me go and see that. Okay, I think okay, just 8 participants are there. Okay, there are no questions open. So thanks for joining the session. Nice having you today. I'll stop the webinar right now. Thanks. Bye.